I do orthodontics, I do TMJ, I do sleep apnea, and I do HealthyStart.
All right, how did you get involved in this? Because if you're doing sleep, I see the link. So talk to me about how your career has evolved into saying these are the things I want to work with.
Yeah. I was diagnosed with sleep apnea myself about 12 years ago, maybe 15 years ago. And that, I said, wow, what is sleep apnea? And then I started to get more interest in it, did research, and found out what it was, that you stop breathing while you're sleeping, and that dentistry has a treatment besides the medical, either surgery or CPAP machine. So about 10 years ago, I started taking formal courses and learned how to do appliances, and that's how I got involved. I think I probably had, in looking back in retrospect, I believe I probably had sleep issues when I was a child, and if you can catch this problem in childhood and treat it, correct it, you can save people a whole lot of medical issues down the road, from cardiovascular disease, cancer, weight gain, diabetes. Many medical problems have a higher incidence in people with sleep apnea than the regular population. So it's connected to everything. Sleep is so important. You spend a third of your life sleeping. A lot of people think they sleep well. They really don't. They confuse quality and quantity. Some people have a lot of quantity, 8 hours, 10 hours. But if you wake up and you still feel tired, even if you've slept 10 hours, that's not right. You shouldn't feel that way. So the quality isn't good, and the quality comes in with the breathing. That's the key to it, is the airways open. And if you can treat children and expand their airway, they don't have that problem. And as they get older, you don't have the medical problems that come out of night after night of lack of oxygen. It affects your metabolism. It affects so many things. It's incredibly important.
The body is such a miraculous recipe of components and ingredients that if you alter anything, it alters everything.
Right. Your body has to make a lot of biochemicals, and they make them at night primarily when you're sleeping. And you need to make enough of them to last you the 16 hours before you go to bed the next night. And if you don't make those, and they're not available when your body needs them, over time, it takes its toll, and your health suffers. Your life's shorter, period.
So if you were to rate this for a parent to try and give their child every advantage in life, you see parents do languages and music and the right school and the dancing, all these things to try and give them every advantage. If you were to rate what HealthyStart offers a child for their life in terms of giving them an advantage, how do you compare it to anything else a parent might be thinking was wise for their child to have?
It's the most important thing. A good night's sleep it's priceless. It's a gift of a lifetime. It's more important than anything else. Obviously, you have to breathe air and drink water and eat food, but you need sleep. Everybody sleeps. And if the quality of the sleep isn't as good as it should be, you will not be as good health-wise as you should be.
Everybody, is looking to try and find answers for what's going on with their child, and it's literally right under our nose.
Sure. Sleep apnea is 85-90% undiagnosed in adults. the medical profession, they don't see it. They don't recognize it. They're too busy. If you come in with, you say, oh, I have a pain, well, they address that pain and that's it. They don't address these other issues. They're not asking why. Why did you gain weight? Why do you have diabetes? Why? They don't ask these questions. They just treat the problem you have. They treat the symptom. If you could take these people and go back to their childhood and correct their airway, a lot of these medical problems wouldn't exist later on.
How would it have changed your life?
I probably would have been taller and thinner. I wouldn't have type 2 diabetes. I wouldn't have glaucoma. I wouldn't have probably a lot of things, or it would be less. So these things that you get old and you think everybody gets, arthritis, all that stuff, don't necessarily have to be that way.
Child. Well, there's no way that it happened overnight, so it happened over time. So it had to be as a child, which means there is every parent's responsibility to know what this is about because it's on their watch.
Sure. Well, most parents, they put their child to sleep and they may check on them if they're relatively young, but they don't watch them sleeping. They don't know what goes on when they're sleeping. And it's just not recognized. So there's behavioral problems, bedwetting. These things come out of poor sleep. And the medical profession likes to give drugs. They like to give stimulants. Isn't it weird that a hyperactive child needs a stimulant? Well, if you think about it, if they didn't get a good night's sleep, how do children behave when they're tired and cranky? So if you give that child a stimulant, it wakes them up. Then they act more normal. They say, well, okay, this drug is really great for this problem. Well, a lot of those kids, they need a good night's sleep and they might not need that medication. So I wouldn't even put a child on a medication without a sleep evaluation. I wouldn't consider doing it if it's my child or my grandchild. I wouldn't do it.
Brilliant. Here's something that I think we've got to get to parents to understand. The clock is ticking. When they hit puberty, 98% of the growth is done. What are you going to do? And then my favorite analogy is taking two little sapling trees and weaving them together. But wait a year, you can't bend them. You cannot undo what nature does if you go past that growth spurt or that growth phase. So talk about how the parent has to pay attention and get these kids fixed before you can only straighten their teeth but can't fix their airway.
Right. Well, the big problem is managing the growth. And if you wait till growth potential is mostly gone, it's going to be much more difficult to solve the problem, if at all. So if you take a child when they're 5 and you help increase their airway, expand their jaws, give their tongue room to be forward so that it's not blocking their airway when they're sleeping, you have taken advantage of the growth potential that still exists. And you can manage that through adolescence. You're going to be doing something that surgery or drugs or other appliances can't do. You've lost that moment in time that you can take advantage of the growth, and it's gone once it's gone. So you need to do this early. Early treatment is really essential to make this work.
What about the fact that you can actually change the appearance of that child's face by fixing the airway and the development of the jaw?
Okay, well, there are research studies that were done. They particularly used monkeys and they blocked their nose, and then they just saw what happened. So they would take young monkeys, block their nasal breathing. They had to become a mouth breather, and all of them ended up with long, narrow faces, real narrow jaws. So it completely changes the way you would have looked if your airway had been corrected. Then the normal genetic potential would have been expressed instead of this altered form, this altered facial structure that is in response to the blockage, the airway blockage. So nasal breathing is really important, really important. Mouth breathing causes a lot of problems. So if you want normal jaw structure, room for your tongue, breathe through your nose, then you will have the facial structure you were supposed to have.
I saw a picture, a before and after picture of a little girl, and I had no idea what this company really was about. And the first thought was, you can't do that. You can't do plastic surgery on a child, because she looked so beautiful when the correction was made. So can you talk about that, the definition of the jawline instead of the receding back funnel effect of the face?
Yeah.
When
a lot of people that have this problem have a small receded jaw. When you look at their profile, their upper is well positioned, but their jaw is back. It needs to be forward. And when you look at people's profiles, a jaw that's forward looks better in any culture. If you give them pictures of people and you say, well, who's better looking than who, they're almost always going to go with somebody who has a normal, straighter kind of profile than someone who has a really receded jaw.
And this is another thing that our appliance will help produce.
Right. It will help bring the lower jaw forward. All babies, when you see them, infants have small lower jaws. And your jaw has to grow out and down, and it takes time, but it will do that if given the opportunity. But if the upper's too small, the upper's receded, it holds the lower back, that's where problems start. And if your tongue is back too far because your tongue is attached to your lower jaw, when you bring your lower jaw forward, you're bringing your tongue forward, and then you're bringing your tongue away from the back of your throat, and you can breathe, particularly when you're sleeping. When you're sleeping, you're laying on your back, your tongue falls back and it blocks your airway.
When you bring the jaw forward, you bring the tongue forward, and it paints a picture that is enormously helpful.
So I treat a lot of children and I see these problems, but by the time I do the braces, it's too late. I wish I would have seen them earlier, back when they were 5 years old. A lot of dentists will tell the parents, oh, wait till they're 12 and then take them to the orthodontist. Well, that's too late. It doesn't even make sense. A hard, fast rule like that doesn't even make sense. First of all, it's by development, not by arbitrary age. But a good rule of thumb is actually to see somebody that knows how to do HealthyStart when they're 4 to 5 years old. That's the best time to start the process to get evaluated and see if something should be done. That's where you want to do it.
Because a good HealthyStart doctor can see the future.
Right.
They can see what is there now is going to develop in a way that is predictable.
Right, yeah.
Okay.
My thing is that I believe I had sleep issues when I was a kid, so I'm aware of this. Most people don't know they even have sleep problems. As adults, they don't know. Sleep apnea, again, 85 to 90% undiagnosed. Most people, they know if somebody snores or not, and that's about it. Well, snoring is frequently associated with sleep apnea. When I go to seminars, the word never is never used, because no one is absolute. Never is an absolute, right? Except the only time I've ever heard anybody in a seminar say never is that children should never snore. If they have a cold, they have some nasal thing, they might snore because they have some congestion. But if they routinely snore, children should not snore. And so people think snoring's funny. You see it in the cartoons, right? The guy snoring and the walls are moving in and out, and people are in the house next door can hear the guy snoring. But snoring's no joke, and especially in children. So and there's a lot of other symptoms involved that we're aware of, but something as simple as that, a parent would not really ordinarily think, well, that's a problem. It's a problem. The biggest thing with orthodontists is that they want control, and when you put braces on, you have more control. You still have to have patient compliance, but it's the biggest thing in terms of HealthyStart. It's all about compliance. If the patient doesn't wear it enough to do what the appliance can do, it's not going to work. So it's really important for the parent to be supportive and encourage and do whatever they need to get that child to wear that appliance the way they've been instructed, and it can do miraculous things, really can. I wish that this was known when I was younger. I wish I had even known about this with my own kids. But at least it's here now, and so moving into the future at least, you have an opportunity to impact your child's life, the health for the rest of their life in a way that never could have been done before. So I think this is the most important thing that I do by far. Orthodontics is, yeah, it's helpful, but it's too late a lot of times to fix these kind of problems. So you end up wearing a CPAP mask when you're 40 years old, or jaw surgery, throat surgery, or some other. I do dental appliances, but you may have been able to avoid all of that if you had taken care of this earlier.
What do you think of Dr. Bergerson?
There are a few people in dentistry that have made major contributions. A profession is really, really hard to change. The trajectory of a profession. If you could move a profession even, let's say, 5 degrees, you are a giant in that field, because nobody wants to think what they were doing was wrong, that they didn't know this stuff. It's hard for them to admit, well, maybe there's a better way. I learned this way. This is the only way. That's a lot of what you get in profession. So there's a few people that probably should be on the Mount Rushmore of dentistry, and Dr. Bergerson would be a candidate. And everybody is trying to do their best, but they don't go back to the most basic stuff and really think about what's really important. And they don't talk about sleep in medical school hardly at all. They don't talk about it in dentistry, very, very, very little. So what's more elemental than sleep? I don't know anything. So, and he has a way to treat children that medicine can't treat. It's really hard to have a little kid wear a CPAP mask, or to do surgery on a 2 or 3 or 4-year-old kid. So
If it were not for him, we'd all be stuck where we've been.
right. So
Cool.
he's a giant. But most people aren't appreciated, in their own lifetime. So